Please be seated. The court is now back in session. The floor is once again given to the prosecution to continue putting questions to this witness. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Sok Chin, I will ask you a few more questions before I hand over to the floor to my colleagues, counsel for the civil parties. If we can return very briefly to the numbers of trains that you saw. You told us earlier that you saw the transfers during October, November and December 1975, and you described the numbers of wagons and numbers of people on those trains. In your statement at question and answer number 15, you said that you saw trains twice a week. If I can first ask you, how many trains did you see twice a week?
I did not count the train. Sometimes I saw the train twice a week, sometimes once a week, and it lasted until December.
Thank you. Do you recall if it was always the same train or if there were a number of different trains being used?
The wagons were the same, but the locomotive was sometimes different.
And do you know who those trains belong to?
The trains were actually those trains from the Sangkum Riek Niyom era. They were old trains. They were not new trains.
Thank you. Just on that issue, you told my colleague earlier that Tam Muam would go to Phnom Penh to attend study sessions, and in your statement in question and answer number 11, you said the following: Tam Muam was a member of the Communist Party of Kampuchea and reported directly to the train unit in Phnom Penh. Do you know whether those trains that were coming through Persat were under the authority of that train unit in Phnom Penh or some other body?
That is correct. The trains passing through Sector 4 were under the management of the chief of the train unit in Phnom Penh.
And do you know who that person was, or what position he or she held?
did not know about the position or the name of that person.
And if we can take a look at another part of your statement, this is question and answer number 23. You were, I apologize, that was 26. You were asked who was the station manager at the Persat train station, and you said the following: there were 3 persons in charge of telephones, but I do not recall their names. They were all Khmer Rouge soldiers, and they were armed. Can I ask you first, what were those telephones at the Persat train station used for?
The telephones at that time were for the traffic of the train movement, because there was only one railway track, so there had to be communication by telephone, so that various station can be communicated for the flow and the traffic of the trains.
Thank you. Do you know, and tell us if you don't, whether all of these train stations were under the authority of the train unit in Phnom Penh?
All the train stations were under the management of the train station or the train unit in Phnom Penh.
Thank you. Was Tam Muam the manager of the train station in Persat, or was there someone else that was specifically responsible for the train station?
Ta Mom was in charge of 2 sectors between Romi and Posat. He was in charge of the traffic of the train. So all the train movement through these areas were under his management.
Thank you. Do you recall how often Tam Muam went to report directly to the train unit in Phnom Penh?
I did not know for sure, as this is his business.
Did I understand correctly that when you were responding to a question from my colleague, that following these trips to Phnom Penh, Tam Muam would organise local meetings where he would pass on instructions to people working at the railways? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. And just a couple more questions. In relation to where the people that were transferred by train came from, you say in question and answer number 14 of your statement that you were told that they were transferred from Phnom Penh, and at question and answer number 23 you say, what I know is that people came from the direction of Phnom Penh. Do you know specifically where these people were living before they were put on trains and transferred to the northwest.
I did not know where they originally came from. I only saw them on the train. I did not know whether they were transported from somewhere else to Phnom Penh and then from Phnom Penh through other locations. So what I saw was that people were on the trains, and after they disembarked, the train went back to Phnom Penh, and then I saw it return again with the people on board.
Thank you. Do you know, and please tell us if you don't, whether these people were placed on the trains in Phnom Penh, or whether that happened somewhere else?
I did not know, but the train came from Phnom Penh direction. However, I did not know whether people were put on the train near Po Chin Tong or at the junction near the way through Kampong Sam. I could not know that.
Thank you. Now, looking at where these people were taken to, there are a couple of parts of your statement that are relevant. In question and answer number 19, we discussed this portion earlier. You described how people were waiting to be loaded onto trucks at Liege. And then at 21, you say that I know that people were transported to different cooperatives in trucks by soldiers and militiamen of Pol Pot. Can you tell us how it was that you knew that they were being transported to different cooperatives?
Because I saw it with my own eyes that people were transported from Liege toward the south direction.
In your statement, again, now at question and answer number 14, you describe a number of locations to which people were transferred, and you mention Svai Sisopon, Battambang, Tmak Khol, and Phnom Tauch. If I'm not mistaken, all of these places are either in Battambang or Banten Menchay province. Who was it that told you that the people were being taken to these particular destinations?
I learned of that information because for each line there was a chief of the line, and I was told that people were dropped off in Svai or at Mokol Market or at Phnom Tauch. So I learned of that through the chief of the line. The person was a civilian and not a military officer. He was a former worker whom I knew from the past.
When you say a chief of the line, do you mean a chief of a part of the railway line or some other line, just to make sure we get that correctly?
At that time, for the transportation, there were two sections. One was the railway line, and the other one was the station. For the station, there would be a chief of the station, and for the railway, there would be a chief of the railway. That is for the entire railway line. And the chief of the station would be at that station waiting to receive the people. But as the chief of the railway line, the person would be on board the train.
And it was that person, the chief of the railway line, who was on board the trains, that told you these destinations to which the people were taken. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Because the chief of the railway line would keep control of the flow of the train movement. That is the departure point and the destination point. So the person would keep record of the movement from the destination, from the departure to the destination points.
And if we just look at what happened, or rather I'll rephrase that, did you ever learn why it was that these people were being transferred?
No, I did not know about that. What I saw was what I described earlier when I worked at my location. My main task was to repair the railway tracks.
Now, you told my colleague that people's biographies were taken before they embarked on this journey. Also, in your statement at question and answer number 23, you discuss what happened upon arrival, and you say that the people were evacuated to other provinces, and once they arrived at the provinces, their biographies were made. According to their personal history, they were transferred to different locations. First, can you help us with what you meant by people being transferred to different locations according to their personal history?
The people who were evacuated from Phnom Penh were a mixture of different status. Some of them were workers, rickshaw drivers, or civil servants. So their biographies were taken at the location where they disembarked. And I learned that through my relatives who left Phnom Penh. So their biographies were made, and then they were sent toward the northwest. All of them had to make their biography. And they were all those people who were evacuated from Phnom Penh.
And this will be my last question. So just to ensure that I have a correct understanding, what you heard was that once people had been evacuated from Phnom Penh, their biographies were taken, and it was after that that they were transferred to the Northwest. Is that an accurate summary of what you've told us?
Yes, that is very accurate.
I'd like to thank you for coming to testify, Mr. Sokchin, on behalf of myself and my colleague. Thank you very much, and we wish you all the best. Mr. President, we have no further questions.
President, thank you. The floor is now given to the lead co-lawyers for civil parties to put questions to this witness. You may proceed.
Oui, merci.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to all of you. Mr. Van Peu will start with the examination, and I will finish with a few questions later.
President Council Van Peu, you may proceed. Van Peu, good morning, Mr. President, Journalists. Good morning, everyone in and around the courtroom. Good morning, Mr. Sokchin. My name is Van Peu. I am a lawyer representing civil parties. I have only a few questions supplementary to what has been asked by the prosecution. My first question is related to your written record of interview, that is answer question number 7, which you stated that there were 18 people in your group when you worked at the railway station in Pusat province. My question is the following. Amongst the 18 members of the group, were they former public servants or were they selected from somewhere else? Response. The 18 members of the group were actually the former railway workers for various parts of the railway station, locomotive, or the station, and then they were assigned to put into this group to repair the tracks. Actually, there were other 3 people within the group. The 3 were soldiers controlling our 18-man group for this 21-kilometer track. Questioned. In your question answer number 10, where you stated that Tamom reported directly through the train unit in Phnom Penh, how did he report directly through the train unit in Phnom Penh? Did he personally go to Phnom Penh or did he use any other means to report? Response. I did not know about that. When he was required to attend the study sessions, then he would go, for example, for a one-day study session in Phnom Penh. But I did not know how he reported to the train unit in Phnom Penh. However, when he left, he always left on the train. Questioned. In your question answer number 13, and allow me to quote, that we attended self-criticism meetings and it was led by Tamek, and the meetings took place every day after finishing main work. My question to you is, what was your main work at the time? Response. The main work was to repair the railway tracks. And as for the socialism work, we had to engage in agricultural production. Thank you. Questioned. Let me look at your question and answer number 15. In your response, number 15, it seems that you knew about the evacuation of people from Phnom Penh in two phases. The first phase was in August, and another one was in October or November, and the third phase was in 1978. Did you observe the three phases of the evacuation, or you only knew about the only two phases? President, witness, please wait till you see the red light on the console before you speak. Witness, as far as I knew, the evacuation by train was only done in the two initial phases. The first phase was the transportation of the new people, and as for the second phase, people were also transported from Phnom Penh. Question, also in your answer number 15, and based on what you experienced or saw with your own eyes at the time, in particular in April 1975, besides seeing the evacuation of people from Phnom Penh, did you observe any other events where people were transported by other means passing through the area where you worked? Response, I did not know about that. I only knew about the evacuation by train. Question, in your question answer number 18, you already responded to the prosecution that in each wagon there were about 2 Khmer Rouge soldiers guarding the wagons. Did you personally, or rather, what was the attitude of those Khmer Rouge soldiers on the wagon, if you can recall? Response, their facial expression was normal. They were rather happy compared to the people. Question, in your response to the prosecution's question, you stated that in each wagon there were between 40 to 50 people. Did you observe whether the people, each wagon was crowded, people were sitting or standing? Response, at that time there was no seats in each wagon because the wagon was designed for goods transportation, so people actually sat on the floor. There was no bench or chair for them to sit. So some were sitting on the floor while others were standing. Question, again in your question answer number 18, you stated that both armed soldiers guarded them on the train, and they would tell when and where to leave the train at the different locations. End of quote. My question is, did you observe that any local authorities or the chief of the district or cooperative would wait and receive them at those different locations? Response, I did not know about who were the chief of cooperatives. because what I saw were that people were asked to board the tracks. So this group were asked to board this track or that track. That's what I observed back then. Thank you. Question. In your question and answer number 22, you confirmed that you cannot recall anymore, and that you could recall that some of the people were forced to leave the train while others continued their trip towards Battambang province. The question is, when the train returned, was it empty or did it carry any other thing?
Response. The returning train was reduced to no more people other than the crew members and the soldiers. Question. With regard to the forced transfer or transportation of the people by trains, according to your experience working through the period between the 17th of April 1975 to later years, you indicated that you saw old people, sick people and young people being boarded on the trains. Can you tell the chamber, please, have you ever seen any monks being traveling on the train? The President, please, witness, wait until you see the red light on the mic before you proceed with your response. Response. I have never seen any monks traveling on the train, and I could never see them because I learned that monks were defrocked already long ago. Question. I have two remaining questions. First, could you tell the chamber about the freedom of movement? Were you given freedom to move freely during that time? Response. I did not enjoy the right to roam about freely other than moving in the confined area of my work at the railway station. The last question, says counsel. On questions number 27, when you were asked whether 28, whether Nuon Chea, Ieng Sari and Khieu Samphan ever traveled to the areas you worked in, and you said you did not know that. But the question is, did you ever have a radio or did you ever listen to radio broadcasts where the names of the senior leaders of the Khmer Rouge would be read or broadcast on those programs? Response. At that time, I did not have a radio where I could listen to the radio broadcasts. Question. Since you did not have a radio to listen to radio broadcasts, can you please tell the chamber finally whether during study sessions or meetings such names of the senior leaders would be read out or introduced with their roles and functions? Response. During study sessions, we were told to pay respect to the national anthem or the flags rather, and then we would be briefed on the individuals in the leadership. Question: do you still recall, for example, what Nuon Chea would be doing and what was his role? The President, witness, could you please hold on, wait until you see the red light before you proceed with your response. Response. I was not told by Tam Mom about Mr. Nuon Chea. I learned very recently about his role. Counsel Nuon Chea, said the President, you may proceed.
The question has been answered. It's now too late. I would have objected to this question because it was asking the witness to speculate, but we can proceed.
The President, counsel for the civil parties, you may proceed with further questions if you still have them to put to the witness. Counsel for the civil party, Mr. President, I thank you very much. I have no further questions. I would like to cede the floor to my colleague to continue putting questions. The President, counsel, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few points, if I may, sir, to add to what you have told us hitherto. You told us that the people who worked on the railways continued to work with you, and you told us in answer number 9, or you told the investigating judge, that the newly appointed Khmer Rouge kept Prung because of his technical abilities. What about the other former workers of the railways? Were they kept on as well?
Response. Prung was the chief of the technical unit of the railway station, and he was kept.
Et les autres?
Yes, but what about the other employees apart from Prung?
Response. I only know about Prung. I don't know what happened to other people in other locations.
Very well. That's all right. Let me now ask you a few more questions about the trains that you saw, because you directly witnessed this. We didn't see it, so we need the details that you can give us, the maximum amount of detail on what you actually saw, because that'll give us a clear vision of what it was like. So coming back to these trains and your answers, numbers 15 to 20 that you gave to the investigating judges, and you said firstly in number 15 that people were put into freight trains, and you said this morning that these were old trains. You told us that people were obliged to sit on the ground and that there were 40 to 50 people in each wagon. Now, were people very much pressed together in these wagons?
Response. No, they weren't, because the wagons were spacious enough for accommodating these number of people, although they squeezed in a little bit, but not too pressed.
So they could all sit down.
Response. They could sit or remain standing if they wished.
Merci.
Thank you. When the train stopped in Lich, did they sometimes stop for several hours at a time?
Response. I don't recall how long the trains would stop at that location, but my recollection is that the train would then move on after people were disembarked from the trains.
Did the train stop in the shade, or was it in the open sunshine, or part of it?
Response. The trains would stop on the rail tracks, and they would expose to the sunlight. It depends on the direction of the sunlight.
Vous avez parlé.
You talked about the people who got off the trains and who waited sometimes for as long as 1 week. You talked about the sick and those who died. You told us about the corpses and the stench of the bodies. When people were got off the train, you said they didn't receive any kind of care and they weren't fed either, but did they receive any water? And if so, what was the source of this water?
Response. What I saw was that no water was given to them. They had to make use of the water from the paddy fields to drink.
Merci.
Thank you. What about sleep? Did the people have hammocks? Were they given anything to protect them from insects?
Response. When it comes to sleep, people would have to manage on their own. Those who could have a piece of cloth to lay on the ground before they could really spend an overnight there, then they would do so. Others would have to take refuge under trees or elsewhere.
Were they given mosquito nets?
Response. No doubt such mosquito nets would not be given. Those who could managed to bring along with them their own mosquito nets, then would use them, but they were not given when they were on the trains.
What about hygiene? What about the conditions for washing and so on?
Response. There was no kind of hygiene. They had to have a wash, again making use of the water from the paddy fields, or maybe had a wash in the paddy fields themselves.
Are you saying that they were washing in the water that they then drank?
Response. Yes, that is correct.
Monsieur, vous avez dit...
You told us that you weren't able to talk to people, but did your hierarchical superiors allow you to provide assistance to people?
Response. No, I myself did not have enough to eat. I did not have enough water to drink, let alone thinking of offering any assistance at all to others, because I had been helping myself first.
Thank you. I am almost done. So, sir, you witnessed all of this, and I'm very grateful to you for all of these details, which are necessary to understand exactly how it was. Now, all of these things that you saw, did you ever talk about them at the time with your friends?
Response. I was very sympathetic toward them. I talked about this to my peers, but I couldn't do anything because I myself also experienced the same hardship.
When you did talk about this with your friends, what did you say? How were you able to explain this to yourself or to them, to justify it?
Response. I didn't talk to them to find out the justification behind such treatment, but I did voice my sympathy. And the talking was very limited because we were obliged not to say anything at all, even we did not have enough to eat.
Pourquoi étiez-vous...
Why were you obliged to say nothing?
The President, Counsel for Mr. Nunchi, could you, you may proceed. Counsel Son Aruna. I take issue with the question as it is more speculative.
Je demande simplement...
Mr. President, I'm simply asking this gentleman to tell us the simple facts about he was obliged to say nothing. He presumably knows why he was obliged to keep his mouth shut. I don't think that there is anything speculative here.
The President, the objection is not sustained. Witness is now instructed to respond to the question just put by counsel for the civil parties if he remembers the question. The President, counsel for the civil parties, it appears to us that the witness may have forgotten the question you just put to him. You may repeat it.
Yes, witness. You said that you felt sympathy for these people, but that you were obliged to say nothing. And my question to you is why were you obliged to say nothing?
Response. Personally, I had nothing to say about this because I had nothing to ask people about. I did see that people suffered and the food was not decent enough, and that happened to me as well, so I had nothing to say.
Let me close on a final question, sir. Were you afraid of talking about certain things in those days?
Response. I was absolutely afraid to say anything at all because I was instructed to be silent.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
The President. Thank you, Counsel. Next, the Chamber would like to ask counsels for Mr. Nguyen Chia whether they would wish to put some questions to the witness. If so, how much time would they need to do so?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Nguyen Chia defense team thinks to need 1 hour for its questioning. Might be a bit shorter, might be a bit longer, but 1 hour should be the target.
The President, we thank you for this piece of information, and before the lunch adjournment, the Chamber would like to announce on the change of the scheduling commencing from Monday, the 5th of November 2012. The trial chamber has been informed by the UNACAD administration that due to financial constraints, the trial chamber is unable to replace a significant number of key international legal and other staff. The shortfall reduces the number of staff to approximately half that foreseen in the staffing table. The Chamber, over the last 3 months, has repeatedly advised the relevant UN bodies and the UNICAD administration of the difficulties it is experiencing as a consequence. In response, assurances have been given that staffing issues will be resolved, but to date, no finality has been achieved. Consequently, the trial chamber indicated recently to those authorities that while there is insufficient staff to support the work of the trial chamber, it cannot continue to sit for 4 days each week, and that regrettably this will lead inevitably to an extension of the time needed to conclude case 002/01. Although this advice was communicated by the trial chamber approximately 2 weeks ago, there has been no confirmation that the staffing issues will be resolved. For that reason, and in order to give the parties and the public as much notice as possible, the chamber will sit from Monday to Wednesday only, beginning from the week commencing the 5th of November 2012. Now, it is the appropriate time for lunch adjournment. The chamber will adjourn, and the next sessions will be resumed by 1:30 p.m. Counsel for Mr. Nuon Chea, you may proceed first.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Nuon Chea, I would like to follow this afternoon's proceedings from his holding cell, as he is suffering from a back pain and a lack of concentration, and we have already submitted the waiver.
The President, thank you, Counsel. Now, Counsel for Mr. Kilsampon, you may proceed. Counsel Kongsamon. Likewise, Mr. Kilsampon is not able to participate in these proceedings in the courtroom because his sleep has been deprived of for the last 2 days, and for that he is not feeling well too, and that he would like to be excused. His waiver would be submitted to the chamber in due course. The President. The Chamber has noted the request by Mr. Nuon Chea through his counsel, and also the request by Mr. Kilsampon through his national counsel, in which they have asked the Chamber to retire to the holding cells to observe the proceedings. From there, For Mr. Kilsampon, we have also received the confirmation from the treating doctor that the chamber is recommended that Mr. Kilsampon should be allowed to observe the proceedings from his holding cell remotely due to his health concerns. He has been weak and fatigued because he has not had enough sleep for 2 consecutive nights already. The chamber notes that such requests are recent, and for that the chamber would like to grant them by allowing both Mr. Kilsampon and Nuon Chea to observe the proceedings from their respective holding cell. Both of the accused persons have already expressly waived their right to participate directly in the courtroom. The chamber would like counsels for both Mr. Kilsampon and Nuon Chea to submit the waivers, given some prints or signed by both of the accused on each waiver to the chamber, and the AV unit is now instructed to ensure that the AV equipment is well connected to the holding cells of the accused person so that they can observe the proceedings from there for the remainder of the day. Security personnel are now instructed to bring Mr. Nuon Chea and Kilsampon to their holding cells. The court is adjourned.